Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and deceased. I have been waiting an eternity to say that, and welcome back to my Walking Dead reviews. So today, of course, we're going to be breaking down Season 5, Episode 1, the big premiere, No Sanctuary. So, spoiler alert before we dive into the mad thick of things, as I shall be bearing all in this review. And for those of you who do not know me, have not seen my reviews in the past, if you enjoyed this one, there's a link in the description to a playlist of all my previous Walking Dead vlogs. I will warn you that this is going to be very long and depthy, so if you're looking for a quick and dirty review, I can offer the latter but not the former. So you might want to jump off this moving train before it picks up too much momentum and you become frustrated. But yeah, I definitely want to break down each and every piece in as much detail as I can, and up front at the beginning I want to discuss a very brief little teaser scene that was offered at the end of this episode, indicating things to come later in the season. So if you guys don't want any spoilers of that nature, I mean, I watched this episode on demand, but I don't know if anybody bailed before the little preview. If you don't want to know what is possibly coming later in the season, then you can skip like a minute ahead or so into the video. I don't know. Anyways, but here the spoilers begin. Let us get into it. So, first and foremost, I will start at the very end and then work my way back through everything else. Morgan is back, and that was a very, very exciting way to conclude the episode, although I guess technically it wasn't really part of the episode, little sneak preview, whatever. But after we see in the episode that Rick crosses off the Terminus sign and just leaves the No Sanctuary part, we see that Morgan is traveling out on his own, and he approaches the sign but decides not to go, not to follow the path to Terminus after seeing the indication that a sanctuary does not exist there. So for those of you who are curious or can't remember who Morgan Jones was, he was the original survivor who was there when Rick came back from his coma at the very, very, very beginning of the series, and he and Morgan and his son were taking shelter in Rick's neighborhood, and they ultimately bring Rick up to speed on everything that's occurred while he was in the hospital unconscious. Rick decides to go into Atlanta to try and find his family. Morgan declines to go with him at the time, but hopes to join him later on after his son becomes more proficient in fighting and defending himself. So Rick keeps in touch with Morgan via walkie-talkie, or at least attempts to, until he and his crew go to the CDC and they lose communication. We don't see Morgan again until the 12th episode of Season 3, Clear, which was one of the most well-written, well-directed episodes of the 3rd season, when Rick and Michonne and Carl are going on a supply run before the governor's attack at the end of the season. They find Morgan having relocated, and he is completely tripped out and booby-trapped this whole street, and he's gone crazy nihilistic after his son died, being unable to put down his dead wife, who Morgan was also unable to put down. And so ultimately he loses hope in any kind of any vision of community. He again declines to go with Rick because he doesn't want to watch everyone die, even though Rick endeavors to help him and they reconnect, and he kind of restores this piece of Morgan's past to him. He has forgotten everything and has forgotten his ability to remember people. And so we assume at the end of that episode that perhaps this part of the story is done, and Rick must finally and permanently part with Morgan, the man who was there at the very beginning. And now the story seems to be indicating that he might be coming back into the fold, which is really exciting and just brings things full circle in a very, very compelling way. Because we see that perhaps Morgan too has learned that one cannot remain in one place. You have to just keep moving. And it makes you wonder what compelled him to move on from his palace of pain back in the 3rd season. what compelled him to move forward and away from the place where he was. Is he coming back around as Rick did after the death of his wife, after losing the prison, after all of these incredible losses? We see Rick has bounced back in a big way, and perhaps Morgan has as well. And it would be really exciting and cool to see him join the group and to confront the things that he thought that he'd given up on so long ago. Anyway, so that's what was really exciting, and you probably, you know, even if you forgot a little bit who Morgan was, you probably found yourself being like, yeah, that's so cool. I don't know why I'm so excited about this, but I am, you know. So that's that. Also, I must say before I forget that it's really, really powerful to see how Rick and Carol reconnected towards the end of this episode, because the note that they left things off on was Rick driving her out and ultimately separating her from the prison community because of the choices that she made about the virus that swept the prison at the beginning of season 4, and when she was the one who had burned the victims and Tyrese's lady love, in order to increase the chances of survival of everybody else in the prison. And those choices that she made endangered everyone because of Tyrese's rage, and her sense of survivalism didn't really work well in the community at that time. And so Rick didn't want to just off her, but he did cut her off. And then so the fact that the last time that she was with the group, she was burning people, and then she comes back around and she burned all the zombies and ultimately paved the way for Rick and his group to get out. So he sees her again and he asks her, was that you back there? And she's like, no, might have been. And so that also brings things crazy full circle, because now we see that the very same choices that Carol made that ultimately separated her from the group brought her back in, okay? So that's some crazy irony for you, but Rick is so ready and willing to embrace her after all of this time. And then Carol and Daryl and the other, oh man, the tears, they came. It was great. It was wonderful. I love the full circle inclination of this premiere episode, and it was quite a euphoric, triumphant first chapter, a debut into what's going to be a very bloody and hectic season, that I can already tell. So I'll go ahead and break down everything for you. We had, really, there were 4 major narratives that were going on in this episode. We had, of course, the not so much the boxcar children as the boxcar badasses, those who were left behind after they had attempted to break out with Rick and Glenn and Daryl and Bob and everybody. They were ready to bust out. You know, Terminus people were screwing with the wrong people. Although we all know what the previous unedited version of that is. Anyway, so they're still stuck in the car, trying to find their way out, and also discussing the cure a little bit in that mix as well. And then we have Rick and company who are on the chopping block and ultimately are able to bust out in vivid colors with the help of, little did they know, Carol. So then we've also got the story with the arc with Carol and Tyrese and Judith, and then the Terminus goon who they find out in the cabin in the woods. So we see Tyrese and his moral dilemma, his refusal to simply kill, his desire to do what is right in the face of atrocity, and then Carol strategically making her way over to Terminus, exploring its sinister depths and refusing to be a part thereof. And with fire and brimstone kind of creating her own apocalyptic vision by from the forest, breaking the gas tank, firing the explosives, setting things ablaze, covering herself in zombie guts, and then so she is going sniper and stealth, and oh man, this woman is a reckoning force. She has gotten her badass certificate. She is certified in the art of pure destruction and mayhem, and I could not possibly be more proud of her for her fine work in this episode, and the very critical role that she played, while at once getting to explore the things that the group already saw in at the end of season 4, just what this world has become, but ultimately reuniting with her friends, and they coming to a place where they can accept her brand of survivalism. It ultimately saved their lives in many ways. And then yeah, so I think, oh, and then of course there's also the narrative about the beginning of Terminus. We get kind of these then and now visions where we see what Terminus has become. And things are going down in a ball of hot fire. And then we see the beginning where the people who were originally at the Terminus compound were taken advantage of and raped and made to believe that you are either the butcher or the cattle, as Mary tells Carol when she enters the Temple of Doom, okay? So we have all these narratives that intertwine to give us really great action, incredible dynamics, the relief of seeing everyone come back together, the tragedy of seeing what Terminus might have been and what it became, and that these people are still trying to cling on to their vision of the world, thinking that Terminus is a necessary place, a necessary institution in this broken world. But Rick and his band of merry men and women shan't be having any of that, okay? So yeah, I love the diversity of this episode. We got some really incredible action sequences. It all begins with the preparation for war. We see Bob and Rick and Daryl and Glenn are on the chopping block. Their heads are above that same trough where 3 men just got baseball bat to the back of the head, neck slit. They're gone. And so they're pretty much next on the conveyor belts until something goes boom. And then we backtrack to see how exactly we get to the point that Terminus is truly falling. There is a herd on the way, and Carol helps direct them into this place so she can penetrate it, so she can find her friends. And then a really, really interesting conversation between Tyrese and the guy from Terminus. So he's there with Judith while Carol's going on her mission. And he and this guy, they have this little back and forth about the way things used to be, who you have to be now in this world. And one of my favorite quotes of the episode was when this guy said that he was telling Tyrese, "You're a good guy. That's why you're gonna die today." And that was such a powerful moment to see how the arc came full circle at the end when this man endangers Judith and ultimately awakens Tyrese's sense of rage and the necessity to not only kill this man whose life he was trying to preserve, but to kill him very brutally. And he is at once resisting his urges, resisting the anger and rage and the taking of human life. And ultimately he doesn't so much give in, well, he kind of gives in to his urges, but then realizes that, you know, who's good, who's bad. And so kind of further enhancing the moral ambiguities of this whole apocalyptic experience, okay? And then, so we get to see all of Carol's very strategic decisions made me most excited. It was very satisfying to see how she can be at once so sensitive to this world, but so willing to do the things that she needs to do. It is really pure brilliance, And so her role in destabilizing things, it allows Rick and company to bust out in flying colors, and as they are working their way out of this system, you know, they see the butcher shop, they see every piece of this incredibly twisted place. And they work their way back to their friends who are still trapped, getting ready to find their way out again. And there's also that interesting discussion that occurs where everybody's talking about the cure. They're like, okay, So we're trying to bust out. We're trying to figure out where we could possibly go once all of this is over. What is this whole cure thing anyway? Is it an elaborate hoax? And Eugene ultimately reveals that the idea behind this cure is fighting fire with fire. And finding a way to release something that can actually destroy the dead once and for all. And it's very exciting that we finally get, you know, a slight indication of just where things are going and what maybe the end game of the series could possibly be. And there's still plenty of room for things to go horrifically and terribly wrong, but it wouldn't be The Walking Dead without that kind of thing. So, yeah. So in the midst of this action, we get the philosophical, we get to see these tragedies and why people become the way they are and just where things might go. So there's a lot of movement into the past, into the future, and a lot of powerful things that are happening in the present as well. We get to see everybody ultimately come back together for the first time in over half a season. Because we saw season 4, the halfway point ended with the let's see, I'm starting to get everything confused. I try and think of things in terms of, you know, where was the mid-season finale, where was this, but you know, we saw, and it was the second half of season 4 where everyone was completely and utterly scattered. The prison had fallen once and for all, and so we get to see all these reunions. Finally, Rick back with Judith and Carl, and Carl. That has now been ingrained in my being. All these Rick-isms that I've had to live without in this hiatus. I mean, that is why it's good to have this show back, okay? Freaking Nicolas Cage, my main man. It's so good, so cathartic. And yeah, and then we get to have Tyrese and Sasha back, and Tyrese and Rick, who in the comics they have a more clearly underlined friendship, but it's just so good and exciting. And we know that there's there's going to be a lot of contention within the group as to where exactly everyone's going to head, because initially Rick is like, we aren't taking off until every last person at Terminus is dead. And then ultimately, when the group is restored, they decide that it is time to move forward. Let's cut our losses and go. But we know that they are far from done with what's going on at Terminus, and that a lot of sinister and wicked things are ahead. We still don't know what's going on with Beth yet, other than the things that we've seen teased out in the season trailer. And she is a part of another system entirely, which is Rick's group going to make it to her? What all are we going to discover in the days to come? But yeah, another really powerful moment was, of course, like I had briefly mentioned earlier, when Carol finally gets into Terminus and she enters what I like to call the Temple of Doom with all the flames and candles and the scrawlings on the wall, and she finds Mary there, and Mary tries to justify everything they've done in this final standoff moment. And Carol's like, no. Not buying it. That the world that everyone in Terminus knows has been reduced to this butcher cattle concept. These two dichotomies is not something that this particular band of survivors wants to subscribe to in any way, shape, or form. And the episode also kind of ends off with us seeing the breakdown of the initial Terminus survivors. And again, it's about all these paths that everyone in this world takes. And is this a world that can be fixed, you know? Yeah, so like I said, lots of really great action. It was very fun to see the burning zombies on March, and then I mean, a lot of the people in Terminus seem genuinely helpless. We've got a lot of people who's kind of flailing on the ground as like a zombie like falls on top of them and eats their face while it's burning, and it's almost it was almost kind of comical. Some moments like, oh lordy, this is something else. I love Rick's tenacity. I love the teamwork elements, the pure victory of having everyone won and back under the same roof of camaraderie at the end. That was a really great way to conclude things, especially since we were left with that really big cliffhanger at the bitter end of season 4. But I like the direction in which things are going. And I haven't the slightest as to what exactly we are in for, because I'm not fully caught up on the comics. I don't know where the show is even going to choose to differ from the comics, and thus I am just going to take the show as its own thing. But what did you guys think of the episode? What kind of feelings did it arouse within you? I must thank you guys so much for watching. I will also be reviewing the new episode of Gotham tonight, so stick around for that business. Fall is a delicious time. It's not in terms of the pumpkin spice everything, but in terms of the death and despair everything, you know. That's the kind of stuff that I'm into. And also, being a literary major and thinking about themes and motifs and stuff, I love the presence of fire in this episode. From the gigantic explosion of death brought about by our beloved and powerful Care Bear to, you know, to the temple scene with all the candles and just the way that fire is used to show how this world is going down in flames. And it's like, well, we knew that, obviously, but could this be the end of the world's end? Is this the turning around point? We have no idea. I heard somewhere that we're getting like 12 seasons for The Walking Dead. Like that is the overall time span that I don't even know. I don't know what to say about that. I am taking one precious day at a time, seizing each beautiful moment. Yeah, if there's anything else that I forgot, please do refer to it in the comments. No spoilers about the comics, preferably, or if you do discuss them, please preface them below. Yeah. So, lots of good stuff. I really enjoyed this. I laughed, I cried, I was full of bliss and terror all at once, all those good things. So, you guys take care. We will hash it out in the comments. We are gonna have a fantastic season. So strap in, and of course, I will see you soon and be back before you know it. Mwah.